Good evening and welcome to A Place Called Through. I'm the host, Patricia Wade Goings, and we're broadcasting from WYTV7 Christian Broadcasters Network. We're here today to share a story, Finding Purpose, given by Miss Claudia Hawkins. Finding Purpose, as we share our story of Mission of Hope. And this story is provided by those charitable donations. And we ask you today go to WYTV7.org, make your charitable donation to help us continue this mission of hope as we empower, encourage, and inspire people globally. Today, again, we welcome to A Place Called Through, Miss Claudia Hawkins. Welcome, Miss Hawkins, to A Place Called Through.
Thank you very much. I am honored to be here.
We thank you again for taking the time out. We know your busy schedule to share your story. You're going through finding purpose. And we're going to begin your story today, Ms. Hawkins, with going back a little bit to your early childhood, your family life. Kind of tell us, because now you're a business person, you're a professional, you're in business. So let's go back just a little bit for our listeners and our viewers, because you didn't just graduate, you weren't just born into a business. So we want to take them back a little bit and talk about your family life. Tell us, how was your family life growing up?
I really had a beautiful, and compared to some, it's almost an uneventful childhood. I was born in Darlington, South Carolina, to into a pastor's home. My father was the pastor of Macedonia Baptist Church in Darlington. So as you can imagine, that is a small town. And so my sister and I, it's just two of us, we were always cautious and told to be careful because we represented the family, which is not unusual for families. They would, they tell you, when you're out, you're representing the family. So I grew up with that type of background, grew up in the church every Sunday and Sunday evening, BTU. So, that was my childhood, small, like I said, almost uneventful, just going to school, doing what I was told to do, and really had no huge challenges growing up.
Even as I know that you had mentioned to me previously that your father was a pastor.
Yes.
And so growing up with a father as a pastor, I can only imagine and assume that it was safe to say that you as a child, and I may be looking back on that, wish that people had just let you grow up as a child, as a kid, because you had that title, that aroma of the fact that you were a daughter of a pastor. And so people assumed
Mm-hmm.
certain things that they wanted to see in you, things that they thought that you were supposed to be doing. So what kind of influences did that have on you as you grew up?
Well, the term is PK, a preacher's kid. And
Exactly.
as I, went around to different churches, conventions, district conferences, and things like that, you're right. I mean, you carry that with you.
Mhm.
And what I learned, I guess, as a young person, either the preacher's kids were pretty good or they were very bad. And the very bad was because they were rebelling, because they knew they were constantly watched. They knew they had to be careful, the places that they went, who they hung out with, what they did. So I had that over me. But the way I was raised, I wasn't going to do anything that really embarrassed my family name. So I don't think I got into any terrible trouble. In fact, what I remember most about high school is my uncle was the chemistry teacher. And this is like 10th or 11th grade. And undoubtedly, I was talking too much in his class. And my mother was like, "What? Are you kidding? You've gotten this far." And I barely had to go to school and talk to any teachers. And now I'm getting a report from my own brother that you are not, you're a behavior issue. But I tell you what, once I had that talked to, and we used to get talked to,
Mhm.
um, I don't think she ever had to mention that again.
So you had a very strong relationship with your mom?
Oh my goodness. Yes.
And
My
your
true
relationship
idol.
with your dad, how was his relationship with you, being that he was the pastor? And I'm sure he had more expectations for you and of you because he was the pastor.
And the fact that I'm named for him. But my going back to my mother was a Proverbs 31 mother woman. So she was the first person that that was always my hero. In fact, as I mentioned to you before, I come from a line of teachers, and she was a teacher. So I didn't even subliminally, I ended up following her in that respect. But my father was I think, a very caring pastor. He would always go and visit the people in the congregation. I remember people coming to our home. We kept a good home, because people might be stopping by. So
Hmm.
I do remember my mother, who was a home ec major. So, we kept our house a certain way because we never knew who was coming. And then in those days, when you had visiting preachers that were coming through, I would imagine from the north, they would come and maybe they had to stay over somewhere and they would
Hmm.
stay in our home. So again, there's a certain expectation in how you carry yourself because you are a PK, people are coming to your home. My father's having to leave, sometimes in the evenings to go visit sick or whatever. So those are the things I remembered. And even though my father is out of eight, his siblings were in Rock Hill, basically in Rock Hill, South Carolina. So every now and then we would go there. Sometimes they would come visit us, but basically it was just my father and my mother and her brother that lived in my hometown. So I didn't have an expansive uh, family close to us.
Hmm. And so, we understand and we see clearly that you did have a good family life, that your family was well connected. And
Mhm.
so, as stemming from that, and now you're going into adulthood and you're ready to explore things, you're trying to find yourself, you're trying to get out there. You grew up as this PK, as we call it, kid, but now you're like, okay, I can move forward, and I want to see what life is on the other side of being a PK kid. So take us to this place called through in your life, where you moved on now from the house that you always grew up in, the house, the love and care of your parents and your siblings and other family members. Take us now to this transitional time in your life where you've now moved on. You've got these friends that I'm sure that you were hanging out with now, because now you're grown. You don't have to be under that watch care, that hourglass of your dad and your mom. So you transition now. You're out there with your friends, and here comes what's next.
Well, again, I like how you put it, my identity, because you're right. When you are a preacher's kid or associated with anybody that has any notoriety in a small town, you are associated with them. And the family name was Bowen. So when I left to go off to college, yes, that at that point, that was my time to what I would call try to find who I truly was, my true identity. And when I went to school, I went to Hampton, followed my sister. It was almost like no discussion. She went to Hampton, you will go to Hampton. So, and I'm sure that was intentional for our parents to have us together, that we could look out for each other. And when I did go to Hampton, I had a wonderful time, but that was the beginning of a wild time for me. That's when I was exploring who I was. Never really got to go to parties when I was living in my hometown, in my family. Started going to parties, started drinking. I did try drinking, and just some things that I never would have even considered. And at that point, I'm thinking, okay, I'm doing good. I'm still hanging in there. And even at Hampton, I knew from my church upbringing that I should be in church. So even regardless of what we might have done on the weekend, on Sundays, I had joined the church choir. So I continued that route. But at that point, I did meet who is now my ex, because he was in the military. And I would say that was the beginning of my being tested to who I truly was and who I really wanted to be and how I wanted to live my life.
Okay. Let's go back just a little bit briefly on what activities did you do in the church when you were still home with your parents? Because I think you mentioned here about being on the choir and being in other auxiliaries. So kind of like, what did you do growing up at home in the church?
In the church, I was a member of the choir. Thank God I have an appreciation for music. I sing a little bit, not solos, but I was on the junior choir, a junior usher, and junior missionary. And we were very active within the district confounds of the church. So I not only did things at the church, we would go and visit other churches for conferences. There was a Julia A. Starks camp that my mother was a director of. So we would go to the camp. It was a youth camp. And, that's where I met other Christian youth.
That's amazing, truly. Finding purpose. And you have found your purpose. Well, Ms. Claudia, stay with us. And we want to say to our listeners and our viewers, just stay there right with us at A Place Called Through while we take a commercial break. And we'll be back with Ms. Hawkins more on finding purpose and identifying who you are. Stay tuned for A Place Called Through.
Swing Into Their Dreams Foundation presents the golf tournament of the year, raising scholarships for aspiring National Golf Club in Milton, Georgia. The inaugural HBCU Swing Into Their Dreams Charity Golf Tournament. Registration and gourmet continental breakfast begins at 8 a.m. and shotgun at 10 a.m. Award reception follows. Come enjoy a day of jazz, mimosa, cigars, cash bar, silent auction, and more. For more information, contact 770-686-7148. Their dreams. Don't miss it.
And welcome back to A Place Called Through, broadcasting from WYTV7 Christian Broadcasters Network. Today, our guest is Miss Claudia Hawkins, and she's sharing her story with us today about finding purpose and identifying yourself. Many times we go throughout life not really knowing who we are until later in life when we'll find out what our purpose is, what our will is. We live according to the will of God, for if it had not been for him, we would not have purpose. And so today, Miss Claudia is sharing with us finding herself and knowing who she is. And, her childhood, she grew up, as people say, the child of a PK. Her father was a pastor, her mother a true Christian. They served and worked faithfully in the church. But now Miss Claudia has left home and she's going to continue her story of telling us life after living as the child of a PK. So Ms. Hawkins, now we have already gotten established the fact that you've moved on from, being under the wings of your dad and your mom. You've already attended college and you've already started hanging out with people who you normally otherwise would not hang out with. You're having this social life now that you never really got to have as you were growing up. And so new people are now coming into your life, new people, that's saying this and saying that to you. But up came this one person whom you fell in love with. And that began another journey for you in your life. So, Miss Claudia, please share with us now this romance, this new path, this new journey that led you on to further things in life.
So at Hampton, I experienced things, of course, I had never experienced before. Just being, I guess, at that point, really wanting for people to like me. And my sister had pledged AKA, so I did follow that route. And then it was almost like, when you have that going over party, you need to have someone to take you to that party. And at that point, I wasn't really dating anyone. So it's like, you need to get, get serious about, maybe thinking about a husband, when you leave here. So I did eventually find someone to go to my going over party with me, and we did have a nice time, but that didn't develop into a romance. Another friend of mine who eventually became a AKA, she introduced me to the gentleman that I married. If you know Hampton, it's surrounded by military facilities, and they would come on campus, and we would eventually, start dating some of them, and that's what happened. I met this gentleman from the Air Force. He was from Philadelphia. He was quiet, nice looking, kind of calm. And, we just sort of hit it off. And that's where we started our relationship. And it was, I guess, it must have been my senior year, because I was an intern and I was away from Hampton for a semester my junior year. So we met, and after I graduated, and that's a story within itself, because it was in the 70s. We were scheduled to graduate in 71. And that's when our college was taken over. Remember that students were taking over college campuses, Black college campuses.
Yeah.
So that happened. I was an intern and waiting in January to be called back to graduate. And we never graduated because they took over the campus. The president sent everybody home, and that year we never marched. So that was something I'm even looking forward to next year, if that's going to happen. But to continue my story, I did end up connecting with my ex, who's now my next ex-husband. I had moved to Atlanta after I graduated, and then ended up moving to Philadelphia where he was. We got married, started having children, and then that's when the going through issue rose for me, because at that point I realized that he was an alcoholic, and I had absolutely no experience with that, coming from the type of home.
Yeah, because you grew up in predominantly, a family oriented home. You grew up in a Christian home. And I mean, it's more than obvious that no, you didn't know anything about these outside ills that now you're faced with. So that alone was a whole new journey. So you went through this phase of, you left home, you went to college, you did well there, things turned upside down a little bit there, but it wasn't your fault that happened. You met and married this guy. And that relationship ended up sourly for you. Because of the fact, I know that you indicated too that he was not a Christian.
Right.
And here you are a Christian. You were a Christian then. So those two just kind of like it was mismatched to some degree. But then I'm sure you stayed just because of the children, and you didn't want to have your family broken up because you didn't come from a displaced family. So you stayed for a while, I'm sure, just to maintain the family. But in the meantime, something significant began to happen to you because of the fact that you are a Christian and you were a Christian. And here you are now stuck in this place trying to really see what it is you're supposed to be doing. So talk to us now, Miss Claudia, that you kind of gone midway through this journey in this marriage and still trying to branch out and see where it is you're supposed to go. Who are you?
Well, I stayed, and the intention was to stay in the family, because that's what I was brought up with. I think just about all my aunts and uncles, everybody was married. Absolutely no alcohol in my home, even though, in college life, yeah, I was around and dealing in alcohol, but not to that point. So the fact that I realized that, he was an alcoholic, I started praying and asking God to take that from him. I just wanted my, sons, having two sons, knowing you need a father. if you're raising sons, anybody in the audience knows, if you are raising sons, you need a father, or you need a father figure. And I did find that at my church in Philadelphia for a while. And then when I moved to South Jersey, I did have some deacons, I could tell, that was having conversations with my son. So that is what I was trying to stay at. And we stayed together for 20 years. And then there was an issue that I couldn't overlook. And I said, okay, I'm going to have to go out on my own. I've prayed, I've asked the Lord to save him, to heal him, to cure him. And it never happened. So now this is where my going through went from just believing in God to being able to trust God. Mm-hmm. And that was my going through. Of course, I believed him because I grew up believing in him, but I had never had the experience or the situation where I was just going to have to totally trust him, trust God. And an analogy I like to make is floating. When you float, you have to put all of your weight on the water. And that's what I hadn't done with my relationship with Jesus.
Because you had to come back now into the newness of Christ. You were seeking redirection now, because you relied on your husband for so many things. And so yes, you kind of got lost in the pathway here because obviously you depended and you relied on him. This was someone that you fell in love with. This is the father of your children. And you're like, oh, I'm married now. I got a husband. I can depend on him. But you found out that in your depending on him, that you needed to redirect your total being, because it was God that was calling on you for something greater. But you didn't see it because the world was telling you, oh, you need to do this. And of course, you followed that model of being married, the perfect home, you got your children. But, you had to learn that there was something else greater for you. Kind of trying to run through it now because we're running out of time here. But I want to get the rest of your story in about you having to find this newness in Christ again and getting just what you were looking for, finding out who Miss Claudia Hawkins really was called to be. We know that earlier in your story, you stated about, how you worked in the church and you served on different auxiliaries in church. And so after this marriage, it failed. You realizing now that you are called to be a servant of Christ. And so from your serving and your redirecting your life and giving your life over to Christ and getting the salvation that you were so desperately to find again. Talk to us now that all of this has happened to you and where you are in your life right now.
So from that point, I did become active in which is still my current church in South Jersey. And I don't know who asked me if I wanted to teach Sunday school. And I started teaching, and I would teach the young children. And from that, I just found so much joy, so much love. I love to learn anyway. And then from watching my mother would go out and do Women's Day lessons, Women's Day sermons, and I would just follow behind her. So I wasn't afraid to speak once I, knew my lesson. And that's where I found my place. My place is teaching. My gift is teaching. And I love teaching. I still teach. I've taught in Sunday school for more than 20 years. I was the superintendent of our Sunday school for about 7 years. And that is how I know my gift is in teaching. I love teaching. I love sharing. I love seeing people say, wow. And it keeps me focused, because when you teach, you are convicted of what you're getting ready to share with someone else. So I need that. And I appreciate that God knew that already and gave this appointment and this assignment to me to be a teacher.
And so, now that you've accepted this assignment, because sometimes God calls us to things and, he reveals his will for you, we don't often accept this calling, but you answered that calling. And now you have a business, a prosperous business, ethics, training, and consulting. We're running down to the last 5 minutes. So when you tell our people about, your business and how they can get in contact with you, and upcoming events, if you have anything else coming up with your business.
So, that led me to ethics training and consulting, and that is from a desire to take biblical principles into the business world. And I am a staff development trainer, and I train on soft skills. And soft skills are like ethics, communication, team building, those type of things, diversity. So I train on those, and yet I found out over the years that my primary clients are people who are believers. So with that experience, with my background and everything, that made me more in tune to be able to share with people in the business world that you can be successful in the business world without lying or cheating or anything like that, and just follow the principles of the Bible.
And that is absolutely right. And you also have an upcoming book, Spiritual Gifts.
Yes, and that is also an assignment for God, and I'm trying to complete that. I'm hoping that the book will be out in the first of the year, Spiritual Gifts, and that is because from being in the church and around church operations, I can see so many churches struggle because people are not serving in the gifts that God has given them. They're serving where people have said, oh, I think you'll be good working in this ministry. I think you'll be good being a trustee, or I think you'll be good even being a Sunday school teacher. But if that's not your assignment from God, then there will be challenges.
So, Ms. Claudia, tell people if they want to reach out to you for a consultation, how can they get in contact with you, or just want to maybe give them some information to speak to you about, what you've gone through?
Well, I would love to share, more of my story if anyone is interested. But you can reach me by phone. I have a website, ClaudiaBHawkins.com, CLAUDIA.B.Hawkins, HAWKIS.com. So you can reach me on my website. My cell number is 856-266-1150, 856-266-1150. So from my website, you can reach me, email, all of that's on there. And I would be glad to share my experiences and learn from you. We learn from each other.
Well, we want to thank you, Ms. Claudia, for taking time out today to share your journey on this place called Through, broadcasting live from WYTV7 Christian Broadcasters Network. You heard it from Ms. Claudia Hawkins, finding purpose, finding your life. Take that advice, contact her, reach out to her so that she can continue to share her story of how she made it through. And once again, I am the host of A Place Called Through, broadcasting from WYTV7 Christian Broadcasters Network. And I ask you to do one thing: consider in the season of giving, even though we're in a pandemic, give so that we can continue this, our mission of hope, inspiring, encouraging, and empowering others. I am also the author of Willpower, The Call to Rise Above. That book is now available on Amazon. To be my guest, please reach out to me in area code of 843-608-9744 via email at pgoingswp@gmail.com. Follow me also on my Facebook page at A Place Called Through at Willpower, The Call to Rise Above. Your call, let's rise above. Glory be to God. God bless you, Sister Hawkins. Have an awesome day. And thank you again for being my guest on A Place Called Through.
Thank you so much for having me.